Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quests to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
It was interesting because, as Monty says, as first responders, we have that brother and sisterhood. We go into harm's way together, and we don't have to talk about it. We just did it, and we do it, and we're friends, and we're part of that family. But we're also part of that family that we lost children. So now, how do you not just become instant friends, like you said earlier, somebody you knew forever, instantly. So that's kind of how it was. It was great showing them around. We've had conversations since. I get to talk about my boy. I get to brag about him a little bit, and that's why I don't mind talking about it. I do some public speaking, and I find that there are so many first responders that I come across that have lost children that I would have never known about. And they come up after the class or after I talk, and they talk about losing their son or their daughter. And it's amazing how many people actually have lost children. And I can tell you that before we lost Kevin and the other 18 Granite Mountain Hotshots, I had never really thought about it. I mean, we had some firefighters that had accident. Their children had accidents, and we had one friend, their daughter died of cancer. So we'd been exposed to it, but it really wasn't something that was, right in front of you all the time. It was wonderful meeting Monty and getting to share our stories about our children.
That's Joe Woyjeck, whose son was one of 19 firefighters killed in Arizona in 2013.
I think my path, meeting Joe, was one of those things that were meant to happen. And little did I know that in our conversations that his son Kevin was one of the Granite Mountain Hotshots of the 19 who perished in that fire. And it just hit me, just chilled me to the bone, meeting this father, this LA County, firefighter, paramedic leader who had lost his son in one of the most horrific, fires that we study and read about. And then in our conversation of just realizing that he had buried his son, and then talking with Joe, realizing that I had also buried my child, my daughter. And it just was one of those times where this bond of being fathers, this bond of being firefighters, but even more, Jason, this bond of here are two seasoned first responders, tribal LA County, who had buried their children. And I have never met another responder who has done that. And tears were shed, and there were hugs, and there was, to me and to Joe and to Jason, this bond that I think so few of us will ever walk through or live through, which is that we have buried our children, in our lives, which shouldn't happen.
That's Monte Fronk, whose daughter, Nada, went missing and then was murdered in 2021. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. Joe Woyjeck is a Los Angeles County fire captain whose son, Kevin, was one of 19 firefighters killed near Yarnell, Arizona in June 2013. Kevin, who lived in Seal Beach, California, was a part of the Granite Mountain Interagency Hotshot crew, an elite wildland firefighting unit sponsored by the Prescott, Arizona Fire Department. Kevin died in the worst wildland firefighting loss in the United States since 1933. Wildland firefighters often carry 40 to 50 pounds of equipment so they can build firefighting lines between erratic wildfires and the homes or other structures threatened by the flames. These firefighters are considered among the most heroic and dedicated, often putting themselves in danger and sleeping in the wild. Hot showers, beds, and warm meals are not common. The 19 men went missing as Yarnell was ravaged by flames fanned by winds that at times exceeded 40 miles an hour and temperatures that were near 100 degrees. The terrain was rough and extremely rugged. Emergency safety officials lost contact with 20 firefighters around 4:30 p.m. on a Sunday. Around the same time, each of the firefighters had deployed their fire shelters, which are portable flame-resistant safety devices that look like cocoons that firefighters use as a last resort when trapped by flames. The shelters, wrapped in aluminum foil bounded to a woven silica cloth, reflect radiant heat away from the firefighter, and the shelters trap breathable air inside them. But ultimately, only one of the 20 firefighters who went missing survived. They were spotted by helicopters. Monte Fronk is a member of the Ojibwe tribe who lives on the Mille Lacs band of the Ojibwe's Indian Reservation in east central Minnesota. Monte is a part of the Makwa clan of the Mille Lacs band of the Ojibwe. He works as a tribal first responder, an advocate, and he is the father of a young Indigenous woman, Monte Fronk, who was sex trafficked after going missing several times between the ages of 14 and 16. Nada had been rescued by the St. Paul, Minnesota police and had just begun to get her life on track when she was murdered on May 26, 2021, at the young age of 24 years old. Joe and Monte share a lot in common. They're both themselves emergency responders. Both of them work to help other people on a daily basis. Both in their work help other people and save lives. But despite their professional credentials and their experience, none of that could save their children from the cruelties of the world. This bond, as two men who have worked together in a field dedicated to helping, in many cases saving people, is of two people who are part of a strong community and who also have the unique bond of losing their children. Today, we're going to talk about their work in emergency services, their work in terms of helping other people, the grief that comes with the loss of the child, and the gifts that come from suffering. So, Joe and Monty, I wanted to thank both of you for coming on and having this conversation with me. I think most of my listeners know, and if they don't know, they should go back and listen to the episodes that, Monty and I connected more than a year ago. And I think we've done probably 4 episodes where you've been on, Monty. But our first conversation was really actually inspired by a friend of mine who is from the Fond du Lac band of the Ojibwe in Minnesota, who suggested to me, finding a story from a Native community that was worth telling, particularly around missing and murdered Indigenous women. And then I just tripped across, a story about you, Monty, it's a crazy coincidence that you're also Ojibwe. And I thought to myself in reading your story and your daughter Nada's story, that, particularly I hear a lot of women sort of like, powerful women, both in the African American communities and Native communities, lending their voice to these struggles, but I don't think I as often hear a father's voice on topics like that. And, at the end of last year, Joe, Monty mentioned to me this idea, the story of how the two of you guys connected and the powerful bond that you built. And he thought it would be a great idea for us to be able to have this conversation. So I really appreciate you coming on for the discussion.
Yep, it's a pleasure. And Jason, as you were telling your story about the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives and how our path crossed, those of us who are in the fire service and those of us who have witnessed and read when we have a line of duty death. It affects all of us who are firefighters, whether like myself, who's a tribal firefighter, LA County as Joe is, city, municipal, combination, paid on call, when there has been line of duty deaths that have made the nation and the fire service grieve. And for many of us, the story of the Granite Mountain Hotshots is one of them. And it's one of those things when we never expect, to hear about this type of line of duty deaths for us who are firefighters. And it's just one of those things that we grieve with the loss for that agency.
Yeah.
Because all of us in the fire service and EMS, we are brothers and sisters in the service to our communities.
And Monty, one of the things that I often think about is that every day firefighters, emergency medical professionals, police officers go out and do this job to sort of like protect us and to serve us and to support us. And we often don't think about it that much. But I know for me, and I don't think I've ever told you this, but I was in Brooklyn on 9/11 and I was working as a reporter. And so as everyone was rushing out of the city, I had to find a way to rush in. And that day, when the Trade Center towers collapsed and in the lobby and the stairwells were officers and firefighters and others who, get up every day and take those risks to serve us. It really stuck with me. Like, nobody expected this morning that we would lose any of these people or that they would be lost. And I think since that moment, I think for me, I knew the service of people who do this kind of work was important, but it took on a whole new meaning, if that makes sense to you.
I think it does, because I think for, what happened on 9/11 and for myself and not about Joe, but, losing 343 of our brothers and sisters in the tower collapse who were doing what they do every day and have that horrible day inched in all of our minds forever. and they will never be forgotten.
Yeah. And one of the things too, which kind of connects to the bond that you guys have, one of the most powerful moments for me after 9/11, this was several months. It was into 2002, but I was assigned a story, or I had the opportunity to do a story where Kirk Humphrey, the mayor of Oklahoma City, came to New York and he visited Ground Zero. And they had sent people from Oklahoma to help in the aftermath. And the New York Fire Department and search and rescue teams had gone out to Oklahoma City in 1996 for the bombing. And the bond that existed there was a fire captain from New York there, and there was somebody who was a part of the rescue efforts in Oklahoma City. And the bond between those people as brothers and sisters, different cities, different places, different races, all sorts of different things. Their bond was kind of amazing to watch. And even, yeah, yeah. And so how did the two of you guys meet, Joe and Monte?
Well, I'll tell you how my story goes, Jason, and that is I have a high school classmate who I haven't seen in 38 years, living in Los Angeles. He works for the Boeing company, and he always said, we have to meet each other and see each other before we get so old we just don't know who we are. And so my wife, Terry, and I decided to go out and visit him in Los Angeles. But also, Joe and I have a mutual friend by the name of Randy Mantooth. And Randy Mantooth is a amazing advocate for the fire and EMS world. For those of us who grew up in the 70s watching the TV show Emergency, he was firefighter paramedic Johnny Gage. And I had the unique honor of doing a tribal preparedness video with him over 10 years ago. And knowing that he is part of the Seminole Nation from Oklahoma and an elder and for me, a very wonderful tribal advocate. And he had come to Mille Lacs and did the video with me at their reservation, but also has always said, you should come out and see the LA County Fire Museum. And that was one of my, lack of a better word, one of my bucket trips was to go out and visit my friend, but also, as we say, go to the mothership go to the LA County Fire Museum and see the history of what got many of us into fire and the EMS service, and to go out and see the actual vehicles that were from the show. And little did I know that Randy had called ahead and really gave myself, my wife, Terry, my friend Tom, his wife, Carla, and kids just the royal tour of the facility, and meeting some of the most earliest LA County fire paramedics who helped design the show when it was on in that time of our history, and was just an amazing gift of history. And just seeing and touching the apparatuses, the fire vehicles that got many of us into this service. But then I wondered why within the LA County Fire Museum, there was the Granite Mountain Hotshot crew vehicle. And all of us in the fire story knew of these 19 brave, and I mean brave, wildland firefighters who had died in this horrendous wildfire. And I just reading the history, and it just sent chills reading it. But then I was also offered a tour of the restoration area where they restore different fire apparatuses at the LA County Fire Museum. And this is where Joe and I, our paths came together. And, Jason, we always talk about things happen for a reason. And I think my path, meeting Joe, was one of those things that were meant to happen. And little did I know that in our conversations that his son, Kevin, was one of the Granite Mountain Hotshots of the 19 who perished in that fire. And it just hit me, just chilled me to the bone, meeting this father, this LA County, firefighter, paramedic leader who had lost his son in one of the most horrific, fires that we study and read about. And then in our conversation of just realizing that he had buried his son, and then talking with Joe, realizing that I had also buried my child, my daughter. And it just was one of those times where this bond of being fathers, this bond of being firefighters, but even more, Jason, this bond of here are two seasoned first responders, tribal LA County, who had buried their children. And I have never met another responder who has done that. And tears were shed, and there were hugs, and there was, to me and to Joe and to Jason, this bond that I think so few of us will ever walk through or live through, which is that we have buried our children, in our lives, which shouldn't happen.
Yeah. What was it like for you, Joe?
First off, thanks for having me on the show. This is awesome. I always like getting to talk with Monte, and this is a unique way to get to talk to him. But I think it'll be wonderful. It was interesting because Randy Mantooth gave me a call, and he kind of prepped me about taking care of Monte when he came into town, and how could I not? So here comes Monte and his little entourage into our restoration facility, and we bonded immediately. It was just one of those things where you have to say a whole lot. We both are talkers, so we talked a lot, but we didn't have to talk a lot. Once we kind of got the initial words out, it was like we'd known each other forever. It was interesting because, as Monte says, as first responders, we have that brother and sisterhood. We go into harm's way together, and we don't have to talk about it. We just did it, and we do it, and we're friends, and we're part of that family. But we're also part of that family that we lost children. So now, how do you not just become instant friends, like you said earlier, somebody you knew forever, instantly. So that's kind of how it was. It was great showing them around. We've had conversations since. I get to talk about my boy. I get to brag about him a little bit, and that's why I don't mind talking about it. I do some public speaking, and I find that there are so many first responders that I come across that have lost children that I would have never known about. And they come up after the class or after I talk, and they talk about losing their son or their daughter. And it's amazing how many people actually have lost children. And I can tell you that before we lost Kevin and the other 18 Granite Mountain Hotshots, I had never really thought about it. I mean, we had some firefighters that had their children had accidents, and we had one friend, their daughter died of cancer. So we'd been exposed to it, but it really wasn't something that was, right in front of you all the time. It was wonderful meeting Monty, and getting to share our stories about our children. And it's, for me, the fire service is it's a dangerous job, and my son was the 9th firefighter in our family, and unfortunately, he died at 21 years old following in my footsteps.
Hmm. One of the things that I wonder about, like in thinking about, what you guys do on a sort of daily basis in your work, kind of like a key piece of it, the core central piece is you go out every day. And, particularly with both of your jobs, you have no idea what you're dealing with at any particular moment, a medical emergency, a fire, whatever, but you help people. That's what you do. And one of the things that I think about with helpers in general, that sometimes we struggle to accept help. And I wonder whether talking about things like this and being able to have conversations like this, like you were mentioning, Joe, that idea that you had no idea that there were so many people who had lost a child, but because you got up and spoke about it, right? You were able to connect with and maybe help yourself and help them. Eh, what do you guys think about like that idea and that notion of like, do we do enough to make sure that our helpers have the help that they need in moments like this?
I can tell you that I do work with our firefighters when they have a incident where they may need some help, they may need some guidance. My phone is always on, but I'm also on a LA County Fire Department peer team. I'm on a International Association of Firefighters peer team and National Fallen Firefighters peer team. The most recent, I don't like using the word deployment, but my most recent deployment was to the Palisades fire, and my
Yeah.
job, yeah, incredible
Yeah.
devastation.
Yeah.
My job was to meet with our firefighters that were in harm's way on day one, and I think that at least on the West Coast, at least in Southern California, that the tide's changing a little bit, where it's okay to talk about it. Talk about something that maybe you were you thought you were going to die, and I did talk to one guy, one of the firefighters from Los Angeles City Fire Department, and he said he was going to die 3 times. He thought he was going to die at that one fire. He said
Mm.
we thought we were done, but we all got together. We all talked about it, and I came on the job in 1980, and I came on during a time of, suck it up, buttercup. Don't show weakness. Weakness is, you show weakness, you're a target. You show, nobody talked about seeking help. Nobody talked about seeing a therapist. Nobody talked about the mental health side of it. And you just kind of sucked it up and didn't say anything. And, you took those demons home with you, and you drowned them, or you did whatever you did to get rid of those demons to get you through the next shift. But at least in Southern California, it seems that it's better now, and in the fire service in general, it's better now. It's okay if something's bothering you, you can talk to it. You can talk to your buddies. You can talk to your your other firefighters, and most departments have people that you can reach out to that you can trust, that are competent with the culture, that understand what firefighters and paramedics do. And it's okay to go and say, hey, man, that one was tough. And maybe you had a SIDS death, an infant death. Well, maybe you have 2 babies at home, one, a newborn and a 1.5-year-old. Maybe that's tough on you. Whatever got you that day for whatever reason, it's okay to go out and talk about it and find somebody you can talk about it with. So I guess it's a different fire department now, that's for sure. Don't get me wrong. We still need to be tough when it's time to be tough. We still need to be physically able to do the job when it's time to do the job. But we don't have to take those demons home with us. We can work on them and get rid of them and handle them and talk to the professionals to get you in a place where your head's right. Because we can't help them if we're not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jason, I would totally agree with that. I mean, for myself, just as Joe does his peer work out there, for my career, uh, I belong to the Central Minnesota EMS Critical Incident Stress Management, or CISM team, and joined the team over 20 years ago because members of their team got myself out of a pretty dark spot I was in. And it was the best way I could think of giving back to those who gave their time to me with debriefings to get me out of that dark spot. And then, as Joe was mentioning, and you too, Jason, was about Oklahoma City. I had a chance to go down there for a tribal meeting and got to go through the Oklahoma Bombing Museum. But also, being a firefighter, I had a chance to actually go to the fire department headquarters and actually meet with the fire leadership chief and assistant chiefs, and just was uh, impressed by what they did for their peers, how for their firefighters in Oklahoma City, how that peer support, how the critical incident stress management, how the therapeutic services were given. And now they have an ingrained peer support teams that actually on their fire department and county sheriff's patch actually have peer support on the patch to show that that is what duty that they do. And that was just a great conversation we had. But also, as Jason, you were saying, that they were talking about the bonds they have with the other firefighters who came to Oklahoma City that supported them also. So you just never know where, these peers come from to help each other in the most darkest days.
Mm. That reminds me of something, Monty, when I was first working in psychology, and I was also diagnosed with bipolar disorder, one of the things that I had created was a bipolar peer support group. And I was talking to this, very talented psychiatrist. And I mean, he was at the top of his game, his ability to have impact on people. And he said to me that if you told me that I could only, so he's a prescribing doctor, either prescribe medicine to treat bipolar disorder, or I could give peer support. He said I would pick peer support first. And at first I was like, that makes no sense to me. But there's something, and I see it in both of you guys right now as you're talking, there's something about someone, as you might say, who has, Monty, as you've said to me, actually, who's walked in your moccasins, who's been in the same experiences that you've been in, that's so powerful to healing, I think. And it's not that people who are not necessarily peers can't be helpful, because they can be helpful, but it just seems like there's something special about, with both of what you're talking about, the bonds from the work you do and then the loss you experience.
And to be respectful of Joe's amazing career with LA County Fire, is that what he has seen, what his department has responded to over history, is almost unbelievable to many of us who are very small rural departments, or who are rural, responders, to, not even probably even come close to understanding what Joe's eyes, ears, nose has listened, saw, and smelled over his tremendous career with LA County Fire, that most of us in rural, world responders may never even probably have a very small amount of. And so I'm always honored when I hear what Joe is doing now for all his peers and out there, especially with this year's devastation. I mean, I can only imagine Joe's experience, his support, his kind words are just have to be just so comforting to those responders who are dealing with those massive fires in his area out there, that I just can't even imagine.
Yeah, no. And Joe, I was curious about one thing and thinking about that with all the fires that were raging in the area, um, you know, toward the end of the year and beyond. I imagine there is probably a lot of trauma among the first responders and really in the community in general. And I always felt that like it, being able to sort of take care of, be vulnerable, be honest with myself about myself also helped me serve better. And I'm wondering, do you think like being more open about these mental health things not only help firefighters, as an example, be better to each other, but be better in their service to other people?
Well, yeah, I think my words were, we can't help them if we don't help ourselves. And I think that if, we can get ourselves right, and if we're able to, lean on each other a little harder, and we understand each other's struggles, then I think we are definitely in a better place to take care of not only our own firefighters and first responders, but the community at large.
One of the things I was thinking about it as you guys were talking about, Monty, your daughter, and Joe, your son, is, so when we're trained in clinical psychology, they give us this giant book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And it talks about grief, right? And it talks about like grief is this 6-month thing. And the reason why it's designed this way, it's just basically meant to say, hey, if grief goes beyond 6 months, that's when you need to worry about it. And what they're talking about in grief isn't necessarily what we're really talking about grief. They're talking about the acute period. But one of the very difficult lessons that I've learned over the last couple of years is that grief never ends. And that the important thing, at least for me, I'm just speaking from my shoes, is finding peace in grief. And I was just wondering, for the two of you, when you think of Kevin and when you think of Nada, like what is the process of healing like, and how do you find some peace in your grief?
Go ahead, Monty.
When I look at, and Jason, we talked about this, and that's the cultural piece that, as Ojibwe, we have a 4-day grieving process. And in this epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, as we talked about before, is I was able to give my daughter, Nada, a traditional 4-day Ojibwe funeral. And I was able to send her off to the spirit world, as we say, in a good way. And I have met so many other relatives in this epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives who may never do that, who live with this sense of loss and grief every hour, every day, for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, where I was able to send my daughter off in a good way, and knowing that our Ojibwe stories and how we send our relatives off is that when they're sent off into the spirit world, we are told that really our grieving is done, because if we continue to grieve, our relatives will not want to go to that place of which we call the place of everlasting happiness. They'll want to come back. So we need to let our loved ones go. But
Yeah.
what got me through also is not only the cultural piece, but also the outpouring of support and care from our brothers and sisters in the fire service. Because as I said, one of the first calls I made when I heard that my daughter was murdered was to a fellow tribal fire leader, Greg Hayes, at Mdewakan Fire at the time. And this was, at almost midnight. And what he told me, what I'll never forget, is he says, "I got you, my brother. focus on your family. We'll take care of the rest. And when that day came for the wake and the funeral, and I walked into that tribal community center up in Missinukkwang, or East Lake as we call it, and not only saw friends and relatives, but all my brothers and sisters in uniform who came on Memorial Day weekend in 2021 to help me grieve, to be there for me. And that's what we do for each other. And that was how I dealt with it, but it never goes away. You know, my wife Terry will tell you I still cry many times thinking about the loss when I see things that mean something to my daughter. You know, the tears are there and the tears are real. And
I also I wondered about one thing too, Monty, in that sense. Like, has a part of your process of healing, and I wonder this for you, Joe, too. You, I think one of the most beautiful things is that you've told her story, and her story is preserved, and it's beautiful, and it's not just about her loss, it's about her life. Has that for you, Monty, and for you, Joe, been a part of your healing too? Because, you know, you mentioned the thing, Monty, what got me thinking about this, that so many relatives of those who were missing and murdered, or certainly those who are missing, um, they're not able to bring their loved one home. And I was talking to a woman from the Blackfeet reservation recently, and I remember we had gotten off of our recording, and she had said, you know, I just want my sister to be brought home. That's all I want, so we can bury her and we can let her go. But the best thing is to be able to tell her story. So she thanked me for that. And I wonder whether that's also been a part of it too, that you've honored her and told her story. And Joe, I'm curious for you too.
Well, for me, it absolutely has been healing to tell Kevin's story and my personal struggles after the loss of Kevin, and the recovery and the stories of our family, and how we got to where we are today. I absolutely can see that me telling the story over and over and over again has been really good for me. I think there's actually something to, I think they call it immersion therapy, where you just keep going back to the same place. And for me, it's you know, I'm good. At one of the services for the Granite Mountain Hotshots, there was a speaker that said, "There'll be a day in your life when you will smile rather than cry when you think about your loved one." And he said, "I don't know when that day will be, but trust me, you will get it." And I'm there. I think about my boy. I get a smile. Don't get me wrong. I have bad days, but I get a smile on my face, and you know, I know I'm blessed, and our family is thriving, and uh, you know, he'd be proud of us for being who we are and where we are. And I think we're doing him and his crew justice, and making them, you know, keeping them alive through stories. And you know, my wife and I are a little different. She, you know, she leans on her faith, but I also say that she's plugging the hole in her heart with grandchildren. So our family is doing really well, and you know, I miss my boy every day, and I think about my boy every day. But you know, and Monty can attest to this. There's a time when you think about him at the beginning, every 2 minutes, every 4 minutes, and then it gets a little farther away, where you know, a little farther down the road, you think about him, you know, every hour, and then a little while later, maybe, you know, maybe every 2 hours. But there's never a day that you don't think about him sometime. And whether that's something triggers it, whether it's a song or a place, or It can even be a smell, whatever it is. That day's there. So I wish there was somebody could have told me that there would be a length of time that you can grieve, not like Monty's 4 days, but when everything was happening, it's like, how long am I going to feel this way? Am I going to feel this way for a year, 5 years, 10 years? It's like this forever. But I think we've come a long ways, and it's almost 12 years now since we lost Kevin and his crew. And I'll tell you what, we are good. We smile every day, and we live life to the fullest. And we're not perfect by any means, and we don't want to make anything negative of it. So we just go out and live life and treat people as good as we can, and hope to get treated well. So that's where we're at.
You reminded me of something, Joe. When my mother died, my father said to me, it was a couple months afterwards, he said, that I shouldn't there's no way to know the way it's going to go. But he said, don't worry, because grief is just love that has nowhere to go. And the implicit message, if he were to finish the sentence, which he didn't because he's my dad, but the implicit message was find some place for that love to go. And it sounds like you have, and you're in communicating and telling that story. And it sounds like you have in your family, and probably for you the same way, Monte.
When I hear what you're saying, Jason, I just think about when Joe and I were at the Fire Museum, and he was sharing photos, and I shared some when I got back, and about Nada's death. But just looking at that, both of our children really got, for lack of a better word, the ceremony that they so deserved. Joe was showing me everything with how his boy how Kevin was returned, and all the honors that were due to a fallen firefighter. But when he showed me the picture of himself going to his son's casket, that just ripped my heart out, because he was in his full Class A uniform, and I just could not imagine what he was going through, except the fact that he had lost his child as I had lost mine. But his son, being part of that crew, was given the ceremony that a line of duty death so deserves, with all the honor, everything that should be done to honor their lives were given to Kevin. As just with my daughter's death, is that her ceremony was a culturally based ceremony of our Ojibwe beliefs and how we are supposed to send our loved ones off. So I think I looked at that, and I just thought, walking away from that day and having met Joe and feeling the raw emotions inside, but not only feeling that I have met a brother who has buried their child also, but also that we were able to give our children the type of send-off or ceremony that their lives deserved.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, as hard to look at this and say in a way that we were very lucky as fathers to be able to do that for our children. And I think how many of our relatives don't get to do that.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, because Nada, was honored as the strong, powerful Ojibwe woman that she was, and Kevin was honored as the hero he was as a firefighter. And that there is something about that, not just that you have the opportunity, but that your communities were able to be a part of that. Yours, Monty, the cultural one, and also your brothers and sisters and emergency services, and the same for you, Joe, with Kevin. I'm curious for you guys. Did losing your children change your lives in ways that you've been able to discern and understand?
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm going to say the negative side of it is huge, obviously, but there's actually been an incredible amount of positive that has come from it. And I'm not just talking about, like we started a nonprofit. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's all good, but just how many people, how many absolute wonderful people we have met that we would have never, ever had the opportunity to meet. Don't get me wrong. I don't need to meet those people. I would rather have my boy back. Trust me. But the the people that care, the good people that are out there, the I don't know. As I get older, I get a little cynical. But I after everything happened, it was like, oh my goodness, I have a new new lease on life, and I think people are basically good, and look at all of these people that are just absolutely wonderful, taking time out of their day just to come be with us, just to be part of our families, just to take care of our family, just to make sure that. And these are people we don't even know. I mean, don't get me wrong. Our the people that we are tight with are, we all have our our really close friends and our not so close friends and our down the road and people that are acquaintances. But the amount of people that just came out and just shared love with us and gave us hugs and maybe didn't even say a word, just were there. Um, they're just present, just being present. And then for Monty and I and others to be able to go out and help others because we've been through it. And, you get a little street credit if you've been through it. You can talk all you want about how you should feel and how you want to feel and how until you've been there and you felt that. And like you said, until you walked in Monty's moccasins, you can't understand. So I think we're both able to give back a little bit on that side, a little bit of love that's been given to our families because we have been there and we understand. And, we don't have magic words. It's terrible when you lose a child, but we've been there and we can, maybe we can say something. Maybe we don't have to say anything. Maybe we just have to be there. So, and there's a ton of other things too, but that's probably right off the bat, one of the biggest things for me is just the ability to help others and some of the people that we have got to meet. And I'm not talking about movie stars. I'm talking about firefighters. I'm talking about the person down the street that is a neighbor that I've never met before that came to visit that I'm now great friends with. So
I so feel you, and I find it so relatable. And I think there may have been another time in my life where I just couldn't even fathom what you were talking about. But like I've at least in my life experience, I've come to the conclusion that loss, like the worst imaginable loss, the loss that you don't want to have, has, as strange as it sounds, been a gift. Um, you know, like with your son, like I would give the world to have my mom back. I would give everything. If you told me I had to chop an arm off or two, I would. But I, because I've suffered through that and other things, but because I've suffered, one of the conclusions I've had is it has allowed me to love people in a deeper way. And I sort of see that in your bond, that neither of you wanted to lose your child, but because of that loss, you've been able to love people, including each other, more deeply.
And Jason, I think that's really true. And I know, Jason, we talked about this, and probably I'm guessing Joe experienced this also. But when the time that this happens, when people come up to you and they just don't know what to say, because we do not expect to lose our children this way, you know? And I think, as Joe was saying, there's just that silence because there is no words that they can say when you have buried your child. And I think sometimes that silence is the biggest gift they give us than trying to say something that, sorry for your loss, something like that, that really doesn't mean a whole lot. It's just words for that, you know.
Monty.
Yep.
Well, you know what? Something kind of interesting. This exactly what Monty was saying is like the presence side, the power of presence. And I I've been doing some reading, and I've been reading some Hemingway, which is interesting, which is kind of out of character for me because it's not really what I do. But there's something that I read of this great big long thing he wrote, but I paraphrased it down to a really short. But it's something about the power of presence. If it's okay, I'm gonna read it. It's really short, but I think it hits, and I think Monty will agree exactly what I know. It hit perfect for me of how I felt, and I wasn't able to put it in words. And this paraphrase is, back to the power of presence, and it says, "In our darkest moments, we don't need solutions or advice. We need quiet presence. Your presence can be the anchor that holds steady when life feels overwhelming. Please don't try to fix me, take on my pain, push it away. Just be here as I navigate my inner storms. You're not present. I can't lean on you as I find my way. My pain is mine to carry, my battle's mine to face, but your presence reminds me as I'm not alone. So in those dark hours, when I lose my way, will you be there? Not as a rescuer, but as a friend. Will you sit with me in the dark until I see the light? Your silent support is what I need to help me remember who I am." And I don't know, that those words just were exactly what I was feeling, but I didn't know how to put it together. And I don't know. What do you think, Monty?
Absolutely, Joe. I mean, I'm sitting here with my eyes closed, just going back 4 years, and it's exactly what I needed. Is just that. And many, gave me that. And because, again, nobody knew what to say, because we do not expect our children to go before us in the ways that they did.
And it seems to be that you're both saying that it's okay to not know what to say and just be there and be there.
So the night that Kevin was killed and his crew, we had about 60 or 70 people in our front yard that night. I remember some of them. Randy Mantooth was there. I remember, some of my really close friends being there. And I remember a lot of the people there, but I cannot tell you one word that was said from that night. But I can tell you they were there. They were there. There were a lot of hugs, but I can't. So the words are not as important as the presence. Sometimes you don't need words. Maybe just a "I'm sorry" and a hug. But yeah, I mean, the words, I can't. I'm not the smartest tool in the shed either, so that makes it easy. But I can tell you, I don't remember a single word that was said that night.
And I will agree with Joe. I know when I walked into that tribal community center on the evening of Nada's wake, and just saw all your relatives who I invited, but also all our brothers and sisters in the fire and EMS service sitting there. And just like Joe was saying, after it got done, there was just so many hugs, and I, life of me, can hardly remember anything again what was said. But I just do remember looking out and just the overwhelming sense of support of just all the uniforms that were sitting in that community center. And this was on Memorial Day weekend, and just sitting there and realizing that they're, coming to support me and my family and the loss of my daughter. And I absolutely agree with Joe. In the day of the funeral, the same thing. So many words. And there were people I see later who I knew were there. I probably hugged them and forgot all about it because it was just that overwhelmingness of a day that Joe also went through. But all these years later, I still thank them. The ones I run into, Jason, who I know who were there, who gave me a hug, who were there, I just still thank them, because I always say I could not have gotten through that without you being there.
Mhm.
And I know you talked to me. I did hear what you said, but I can remember seeing you in your full Class A uniform, and that presence said everything.
Right. And I wonder too about the other side of it, and I want to give you all guys also a chance to give closing thoughts, but I wonder about the other side of it. Joe, when you were talking in the beginning, you mentioned that idea of like, growing up in an era where you were just supposed to be tough. I think so many people not only don't know what to say to people who are grieving and mourning, I think so many people who are going through something traumatic don't know what to say or feel like they shouldn't say anything or do anything. And I see such valuable things in the fact that you guys are willing to be as open and vulnerable about it. And when I hear you talking, I see that that's a part of your healing. Is there any message that you would have for that father, that mother, that brother, that sister who's going through a loss like this, in terms of being able to sort of push forward, to share their story, whether it had, you know, any thoughts for those people who are just stuck and
You know
don't know
what?
what to do?
I mean, obviously, uh, if you're stuck, maybe professional help might help. That might help. Find somebody that you like, and don't be afraid to get professional help. But we're in a new world now with social media, and I think for something that I did was I really got uh, after everything happened, got into the social media side of it so that I could share information with a lot of people, because I didn't want to take a million phone calls a day. I could, send out, hey, the family's doing great today. We've got this service on this day, and we were able to, get information out without having to, tell the story or talk. And sometimes you just aren't ready to talk to, you're not ready to talk, but you can still share information at your leisure. I think that uh, if you have a friend or somebody that has experienced a significant loss, don't be afraid to uh, send them a text. Maybe not call them, right away, especially. Maybe not. Depends on how close you are to them. But shoot them a text. Just tell them, "Man, I'm thinking about you. I'm so sorry to hear." Maybe send them give me a call when you're ready, and they'll give you a call when they're ready. Don't be afraid to follow up with that a few days later, a few weeks later, if they haven't called you, because they're overwhelmed. Um, I know that. And Monty, tell me if you had this issue where uh, you're walking around and you walk in the market or you walk someplace where there's people and they avoid you. They turn the other way because they don't know what to say. They're embarrassed. Did you ever have that happen, Monty?
Joe, just like you, a lot,
Yes.
because when your child is murdered, nobody knows what to say to you. They can understand when you lose a child to an illness, maybe to a car accident, something that is more accepted. But when your child was killed in a murder-suicide, they avoid you because they don't have a clue about what to say to you and would rather say nothing and avoid you because it's something that they cannot relate to at all. And yeah, definitely so. I definitely saw that a lot in my time because I understood that what I experienced with the loss of my daughter, of this, murder suicide that happened with her, and also being that she was human trafficked between 14 and 16, is just things that other parents can never understand, or just can never believe that can happen to a child. And we live with that. And I think a lot when I met Joe and we were hugging, and besides the connection that we had, when I was leaving the museum and just also thinking that, here are two firefighters who have buried their children and never probably thought that their story would help others, that they would be being asked to go to different places to tell the story of their loss, to help others, whether it's the fire EMS world, as Joe does so well, or with my path of the missing and murdered Indigenous relative epidemic. I never thought that it would have taken me down this path of talking to so many about what I have been through. And, even though I knew the advocates who approached me after we sent her off to the spirit world and who said to me, when you are ready, be your daughter's passion, because she didn't get to live that. And knowing that in this epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, we hear from all the strong Native women who are on the front lines, but never from the fathers. And that was something that was very surprising to me. And to this day, I'm always, when I'm asked to tell the story still, I'm just always humbled, and hopefully it may help others. And I know what Joe has been through has helped many, I know, through his journey and his stories.
Yeah. I remember, Monty, when we first talked, I don't know if I said this out loud or thought it in my head, but I remember thinking to myself the same thing. And, it wasn't because I had heard it before, but I remember just thinking, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. And it's okay to not know what to say, because it's the voice on the other end of this story, that's really the important one. And I appreciate you guys both being willing to share your stories, to honor your loved ones, to help other people who are suffering, because ultimately the one thing we as humans share, even though I cannot imagine what it's like to lose a child, I just can't. I do know that suffering is universal and that there's something for all of us to learn from these experiences. But I wanted to give you guys a chance to just share any closing thoughts you have for people, anyone, whether they're going through something like this, or they're around it, or they're working in the profession, helping others and dealing with their own traumas. Just any closing thoughts that either of you have. And Joe, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah. The closing thoughts would be, there's no book on this. There's no absolute way that your loss is absolutely going to go. We're all different people. We're all different humans. We all grieve different. You might be angry, and you might be sad, and it may take a month, a year, 10 years, 20 years. You may never get over it. We're all different. So if you know somebody that's suffering and they're not getting over it, maybe help them get some help. If you're suffering and it's not getting better, don't be afraid to get some help. I was that guy who said, I'm never going to go. I don't need to go to a shrink. I don't need to go see a professional. And finally got to a point to where something had to change, and I did, and it was life changing for me. And I think I have 12 or 15 of my fellow firefighters going to the same doc that I went to. I only went to him 3 times, and that was all I needed. So don't be afraid to get help. It's not, the stigma is out there. Don't, number one is you. Don't worry about other people. Get yourself taken care of, and I hope I hope you never are in this position, obviously. And I want to thank you guys for letting me go on and back to the loss of our children that brought Monty and I together, and through our friend Randy Mantooth, and I really appreciate the time and getting to share a little bit of my story about my boy.
Yeah. Sounds like he was a beautiful boy.
He's a good kid.
Yeah.
Miss him dearly.
Yeah. Monty?
When hearing Joe talk about the healing process, and I think if we have a large group listening to this podcast who are, fellow firefighters and EMS, we know in our careers, all of us have had calls where unfortunately, our patients, we've lost children in medicals, we've lost children in fires. But I think that what Joe and I have lived through, when it's your own, it is something entirely different that very few will understand, especially I believe in our world. And luckily Joe has met others, and I have not met others who have other fellow firefighters who have lost children, except in what I do for the MMIR situation of talking about, in the missing emerging indigenous relatives. But I really think that there are places you can go, people who Joe and I, for example, are examples where what we do now is help others. We took an oath to protect life and property as firefighters and EMS. But now this next journey that we're on is also helping those who have experienced these losses also. And to say that we have walked this path together. Joe and I have walked this path, and to be able to tell that, to help others, and to seek the right care that you need, whether it is peer-to-peer. And I always say, it has to be culturally competent because of the diverse world that we live in. And being in Ojibwe, we know there are 580 federally recognized tribes and large urban native populations. And when we seek that type of help, we have to make sure it's that culturally competent to meet not only our cultural needs, but our spiritual needs also to get through this. But we also know that in the fire service too, is that there's also that care that we give each other also, that we don't forget. When we say Kevin's name, when we say Joe's name, my daughter's name, Nada, we don't forget. And Joe's absolutely right. There are places that I go out to that bring those memories up, and some bring a tear and some bring a smile. But yes, I miss my daughter Nada every day, and every birthday I always wonder myself what would she have been doing at this time of her life with that one. And I always think I was hoping she would be helping other Native women. That was her passion to do, who were human trafficked, which she never got to do.
But Monty, she is just through you.
Yeah,
through you.
And Joe is, and through, and Kevin through Joe. I mean, that's what we do. And And I hope that Kevin is looking down where he is at and he's happy because what he sees of his father. And I know my wife, Terry, has told me many times that Nate is looking down and, happy and smiling at me also.
Yeah.
And I think that's what gets me through the hard days when those memories come back up again,
Yeah.
for her. But I think, again, the journey that a travel to a place where a mutual friend, Randy Mantooth, has brought two firefighters together that never knew they had this bond of not only of the fire service, but of our children. And after we departed, Joe sent some additional video footage of Kevin. I sent to him some of the story about Nada, and it was just, those powerful moments that, even though we're hundreds of miles apart, is that we have this connection that to me is a gift and an honor to know, and to know Joe's out there and what he's doing is helping, and Joe sees me where I'm at doing the same thing. And Jason, you've had the gift of our stories.
Mm.
Joe and I in the fire service, we're storytellers. And I think we have told our stories of who we are as fathers, but also the pride and the love and the grief we experience for the loss of Kevin and for the loss of Nada, but also that unique distinction of that both of us were able to give the right ceremonies to our children so they can be in a better place.
I just want to close with one thing or two thoughts that I had. When I was in Minneapolis in December, I had, before that, interviewed an Ojibwe man, Antoine Truer, who's the scholar and interesting guy. And one of the things that he had said to me, Monty, was that, in Ojibwe culture, one of the elements for some Ojibwe is this idea of like you look out into the sky the dawn is happening and there's that sliver of the sun, that's cut there. And you think of your relatives dancing in the sky. And I remember that stuck in my head. So the night that I was flying out from Minneapolis back to Washington, D.C., and I have this picture, it's my background on Facebook right now. There was this unbelievably brilliant red line in the sky. And I thought of my lost loved ones there. And I thought of Nada. And I thought of all the people that I've interviewed who have lost someone. So, Joe, I'm going to add Kevin to my loved ones dancing in the sky, where Nada already is. And the second thing I wanted to tell you guys, I have a really close friend who says to me, Jason, why do you, for the podcast, do such sad stories? And I said, yes, they are sad. They are sad stories, but they are also the most beautiful stories. And I think that both of you are beautiful people, and Kevin and Nada are beautiful too. And I feel honored to have had the opportunity to get to know them. And I hope someday in the afterlife, I'll get a chance to go up and hold their hands and you'll introduce me to them. I'm just, like you said, Monty, I am grateful and I have had the gift of their stories and I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate, Jason, you taking the time to do a podcast for two stories of two firefighters, one tribal, one LA County fire, who have taken this journey. But also, as we mentioned, without our good friend Randy Mantooth, bringing us together, this would have never happened. So I'm also grateful for Randy and hoping he'll be listening to this also and hearing that what he's done for Joe and I as also won't be forgotten.
Thanks, Monty. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining us for this conversation. If you'd like to join us for more discussions with me and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-run Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. For deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with me and other listeners, and to support the podcast, you can also join us on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Silver Linings Handbook. I'm Jason Blair, and this is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. We'll see you all again in a few days.